So we'll start by setting our motivation, establishing a vast, expansive, altruistic mind, one that aims to embrace all sentient beings without exception. Generating that mind of bodhicitta on the basis of the mind of confidence or faith, and the powerful, non-deceptive, reliable teachings of the Buddha. Which in turn leads to our understanding of the Buddha and his teachings and the community of practitioners who have realized his teachings as being a valid source of refuge and protection. So contemplate in these ways and try to generate strongly those minds of faith and refuge in bodhicitta. All right. So we are discussing the section on engaging in the deeds of a bodhisattva, which is a little bit different than just saying the six perfections, because there are a couple of other contemplations that are included in this section, like the four means of gathering disciples, for example, which is another action or deed that a bodhisattva would engage in. But one of the main aspects of progressing through the bodhisattva grounds and paths are specifically the six perfections, and that is the subsection that we're in presently. So we would begin with day 331, which is the perfection of patience. Unless there are any thoughts or questions about last week. Okay. So patience, last Tuesday, Geshe Dundra taught on patience and, made clear that the mind of patience is not a passive mind. It is a calm mind. It is a mind that isn't giving into or responding to difficulty with a sense of anger or a sense of aggression or anything. It's a mind that is able to move through the experience of adversity while trying to prevent the afflictions from taking root in the mind. So a person certainly can, depending on the exact circumstances of a difficult situation, certainly can be attempting to find a solution, actively, uh, trying to resolve the difficulty, if that seems possible, if that seems like something that can be accomplished. But while engaging in that process of looking for a solution that is, ethical and um, you know, in line with the person's spiritual views, that mind is simply a mind that is stable and peaceful and calm, and isn't giving in to the impulse to respond negatively to that adverse condition. But certainly, um, there may be circumstances where something seems fully outside of a person's control. And in that situation, then, we do maybe just have to see it through. But certainly there isn't anything within patience itself that would require a person to do nothing in in the face of a difficult circumstance. Um, so Lama Zopa says that patience is the most important thing we can learn, so we should put great effort into it. So, I mean, of course, um, one could say that emptiness is, the most important thing that we can learn, um, in a different context. But um, as a practical matter, um, we when we engage in a lot of negativity on the basis of anger, which is sort of what often would happen if we were experiencing adversity without practicing patience, it's likely that anger would be what is going to predominate the mind. Then there's all kinds of negative karmas that would arise due to the being affected by anger, that we can put a stop to through the practice of patience. Um, and of course, we know that emptiness is the ultimate antidote to any affliction. So if we can see the emptiness of the self experiencing the difficult, like we talked about before, the emptiness of the three spheres, the emptiness here of oneself, experiencing the adversity itself, and then, um, maybe the actions that are the sort of the angry actions that are coming to our mind as what seem like a solution or seem like something that we could do. If we can see through all of that and see the ultimate nature of those things, then of course anger also wouldn't arise. But from a conventional standpoint, irrespective of how easily we can see the emptiness of those things, we still can practice patience. We can still familiarize our mind with the advantages of practicing patience, the disadvantages of giving in to the mind of anger, and other particular ways of transforming how we are interpreting what's happening that is going to make it more likely that we can respond with patience rather than with anger. So in this contemplation, Lama Zopa explains three different types of anger, of patience. So the first type of patience is not retaliating when faced with harm. So this could be, someone else saying or doing something that is physically or mentally agitating or disturbing. Um, Even, intentionally or unintentionally, we feel, whenever we feel like we've received a harm, maybe they didn't, maybe they had no awareness that we were even there, when they pulled out in front, of us in traffic, but still we feel harmed by what happened. And when we feel harmed, one of the default tendencies that we have is to respond with some aggression, to yell, to give a dirty look, to say something perhaps unkind. Really, the goal is to intimidate. The goal is to cause the other person to change their behavior, their action, by showing dominance, by showing aggression, by causing them to what we hope would happen is that they would back down, and reverse course and do something else. So here that's being referred to as retaliating. um, and one of those ways of reframing that is that is presented here in the contemplation is to recognize that perception of harm is the result of our familiarity with the self-cherishing mind, um, the mind that subconsciously, unconsciously holds the view that we should never be inconvenienced, or we should never be spoken to harshly, or whatever it might be that we're labeling as a harm that we're receiving. um, and again, as with the other contemplations, if it's true that we wish to progress spiritually, then overcoming the self-cherishing mind is critical. And this is again another example of having data about our own, the influence of self-cherishing in our own mind, and then being like, wow, I didn't know that when a person would say or do that I would kind of naturally or spontaneously, without thinking, kind of say, instantly say something unpleasant in response, or give them a dirty look, or what have you. And now we know that about, how we respond, and that's, critically important.
Excuse me, Venerable. It sounds as though practicing patience has a lot of different facets to it. You said earlier that it isn't necessarily a passive practice, that it has, that you don't necessarily stand idly by, that's not necessarily patience. Um, and I see that there are moments when being quiet and not reacting is um, the best route. And also, um, using an action of patience. I think of people who, in a situation, they simply don't respond, which antagonizes people. If there's a situation and there's absolutely no response whatsoever, because that person is perhaps being quote unquote patient, that there's obviously a time to be actively patient, from what you say. Is that correct?
So um, so here, I mean, with respect to this first kind of patience, where so these difficult circumstances can show up, as you're saying, in different ways. And with this first example, we have the example of someone else who is causing harm to oneself. Um, and how a person would know that they were responding with patience, to in that situation, is if internally their mind was undisturbed, if internally the actual mental state that was arising in response to whatever action that other person took, that it was just kind of rolling off of them. And they were like, well, this isn't, this is an expression of this person's, mind, or it could be that they didn't, they didn't mean to do something that often would come across as intentionally, disrespectful, or, it's so their internally, their mental state is a mind of peace, a mind of stability, of calm. Um, if there's a like a period, for example, of like sustained, um, like like a road rage kind of incident, for example, where another person like is getting out of their car and they're coming toward, you know you, or whatever, and so it's not just a really brief momentary thing, but there's maybe a longer period of ongoing concern. um, then definitely, finding a way of exiting that situation, of going somewhere else, of doing something to try to diffuse the situation. Those are all, so it doesn't mean that you just kind of turn your car off and, roll up the windows and just sort of sit there while they're trying to beat down the door, or, gain entry or something. Certainly you might, find some sort of course of action. Um, but as you're doing that, internally, you're not wishing ill on the other person. You're not attempting to respond to harm with harm. You're just trying to resolve what's happening in the best possible way. So, certainly you're not responsible if someone says something to get a rise out of you and you don't give them that satisfaction, then, and then they get more agitated. Um, that's certainly not your responsibility. You shouldn't. That's their own, but if they are starting to spiral, because you didn't respond in the way that they were expecting, or the way that they tried to fight you or something, and you didn't rise to that and go, like sure, let's go outside, and you didn't kind of feed into what they were hoping. And then they feel embarrassed, and then because they feel embarrassed, now they're going to be even more, angry or what have you. Certainly, as a practitioner, all of that sort of domino effect isn't something that we have any control over, but it could mean that we then need to find some new, maybe if it's getting worse, then of course we can say, well, okay, I tried this one thing, um, and it's not actually diffusing the situation. So now I need to actually physically I need to go somewhere else. I need to, um, or I need to try to say something that might have a different, effect. Um, so we should certainly do our best to kind of cause the situation, um, to be different than it is, if there's something, that actually requires intervention or requires some sort of action. And we may not know what that is. We just do our best. We may try something and realize that that wasn't the right thing for that situation, and then that's also just, you know we're ordinary sentient beings, and so we may not say the right thing or do the right thing. But what's critical, what the actual training isn't really exactly whether we are successful in saying or doing the right thing, the thing that actually causes the best possible outcome. We don't know what that is, and we might make mistakes in trying to bring that about. But what we can practice is the mental state that is actually occurring just in our own mind, and whether that is a mental state that is seeking the harm of the other person, or is just trying to see it, in a balanced, realistic way, and try to cause it to kind of be resolved in the best way that is possible given the circumstances. Um, and of course, there's other times when we're sticking up for other people, or we're trying to resolve a situation where there's harm that isn't, isn't that we're not directly affected by, and but still in that situation, it's still essentially the same training where we're trying not to think of, okay, well, this is the good person and this is the bad person, and I'm going to resolve this by, you know, destroying the bad person in favor of the good person. But, you try to find some sort of resolution, to the underlying problem that isn't about, blaming and then concretizing the situation and saying, oh, this is an intrinsically bad person or group of people that deserve to be harmed. But just kind of thinking, okay, well, what can we do? And there may not be, it may be outside, again, maybe outside of your control ultimately. And so the best you can do is try to support, try to provide food or shelter, or, recognizing that the difficulty might still continue because you ultimately, you can't bring it to a conclusion.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions? So then the second type of practicing patience is bearing hardships. So the first was feeling harmed by the actions of others, and bearing hardships is more so, in a way, maybe more so environmental. Um, these are not necessarily slights or harms that we're receiving through the actions of other people, but maybe just we're caught in a difficult situation, like there's bad traffic, or there's a storm, or the power goes out, or um, the things are not, we have a difficult work situation that's sort of, no one's harming us, but there's stress in particular circumstance, um, and so we're feeling that things that we're experiencing are challenging in a way that we would prefer that we weren't experiencing. We would like it if we could just always get to where we're going without there ever being a traffic jam, or we would prefer that, there's never a lot of snow, or it's never, 100 degrees outside, or, that whatever kinds of circumstances that we're facing are never an obstacle to things being easy and kind of light all of the time. Um, so and then Lama Zopa says, that this is even particularly important for Dharma, practitioners, because um, we don't always, that when we seek out teachings and when we seek out opportunities to do retreat and so on, it may be that we have to travel, to certain places. We may have to have food that's not the kind of food that we would prefer. We may not have a comfortable, bed. There may, we might, our sleeping schedule might be, impacted. And if we are someone who's deeply habituated to comfort and requiring comfort, not someone who doesn't have the ability to tolerate um, hardship, then we will lose out on all of those opportunities where, oh, we thought we were going to be able to do this, this amazing, 2 week retreat, or go to this thing, but then we get there and the mind is agitated because we would like it if the food was better, or we would like it if we could sleep more, or if we had, it's not our bed, or it's too noisy, or so this is kind of about resiliency, developing a sense of resiliency in the mind with practicing difficulties. And of course, during the time of death, too, there's going to be pain in the body. There's going to be, we have to work through feelings of maybe separating from people and circumstances that we enjoy being connected to, and those are hardships. And um, if we don't have any experience, if we've never trained in bearing hardships, then certainly the mind, during the death process would also might be negatively, impacted. And then the third type is the patience of gaining certainty about the Dharma. And he says, which we achieve by meditating on and understanding the meaning of the Lamrim and the extraordinary qualities of the three rare sublime ones, or the three jewels. Um, so this is, in a way very similar to joyous effort, but understanding that our not like unrealistic expectations about our practice, and thinking, oh well, I just need to do it for a short period of time, and then all of these amazing results will just very easily flow. Kind of recognizing that it's a daily, lifelong practice, and not thinking that, well, certainly within a month or within 5 years I'll be able to gain this quality, and this, and then if that doesn't happen, feeling defeated, feeling frustrated, and maybe even just giving up our practice, recognizing that it's every single day for the rest of our lives is our spiritual practice, and not thinking of it as something that's going to happen quickly or easily, or without having to you know spend time and spend effort, and even maybe the realizations that we were hoping for don't come, um, and just being okay with that, and recognizing that it's just trying again and again and again. So then he says, of course, that this practice is our responsibility for how we are taking care of sentient beings, because um, we we remove ourselves as a threat to sentient beings the more we can practice patience. We can see that all of the you know wars and things that are fought with an angry, aggressive mind, and even interpersonal violence and so on is the result of the mind of anger. How dare this person or this group intrude on what my land, my sovereignty, what and then you respond to that with force and aggression, and then they respond with force and aggression, and it just sort of, and so if and we will, I mean, given future lives, if we are not actively practicing patience, if we're practicing anger, if we're practicing, being short tempered and so on, then that tendency is what we're nurturing, and that tendency will grow. over time. And then we will, maybe not in this life, we won't, act on it in a really terrible way, but eventually we will. Eventually that tendency will become stronger and stronger. And then all of the, terrible, despotic actions that we observe will be the kinds of actions that we ourselves in a future life are engaging in because of our own lack of the practice of patience. So we become, you know, safe for sentient beings by practicing patience. We become someone that where they have nothing to fear from us through our own practice of patience. Any other thoughts or questions on perfection of patience? All right, so day 332 is on now joyous effort uh, or enthusiastic perseverance. Those are the two uh, general translations of the same thing. Um, so the quotation, those who have perseverance have no obstacles. They can achieve whatever they want, from Lama Zopa. Then in the commentary, it says perseverance is the mind of enthusiasm or energy that rejoices in virtue, and like the other perfections is a vital quality for us to develop. With this mind, we can put effort into removing the delusions, the obstacles that block our mind from attaining perfect concentration. Without perseverance, even if we try to concentrate, we are trapped in the disturbed mind, distracted by either sinking or scattering thoughts, like being caught between the fangs of a vicious animal. So, as it says, this is a mind that really delights in virtue, a mind that sees the incredible benefits of putting effort into our spiritual practice, into, really developing the skill of meditation, in, having enthusiasm for learning, for going to teachings, for putting, and then subsequently actually putting those teachings into practice, seeing all teachings as personal advice, trying to understand how then to implement or incorporate those teachings into one's own personal practice, and again, and never getting discouraged. Even though we see that, they say that the path can be, something that is maybe eons of lifetimes of practice, recognizing that and not feeling discouraged, not thinking that that's overwhelming or that that's too much, that it's never too much if our goal is to achieve enlightenment. So whatever difficulties arise in our, to achieve our goal, we're willing to endure those hardships, those difficulties. Uh, So he says, for the sake of every single sentient being will be able to work without discouragement or exhaustion, even enduring the suffering of the lowest of the hot hells for an ocean of eons if we need to. He says we must have this kind of resolve. So, as it says, even, to descend the fiery hells of Avicii, even for the sake of one single sentient being, that's the brave attitude of a bodhisattva. That so again, these are the perfections. This is on the bodhisattva path, but still, that's the goal, is to have that kind of, as he says, that resolve, that determination, um, that we look forward, and so I mean, for us right now, more conventionally, it's sort of about really looking forward, trying to develop a mind that looks forward to our practice and doesn't think of it as something that we have to do, but something that we get to do. And thinking how extraordinary it is that the Buddha and countless other great beings have laid out all of these incredibly effective, incredibly powerful antidotes to our own disturbing attitudes, our own anger, our own jealousy, our own attachment, and so on. And thinking, like we would be so motivated to, um, just get a bigger house if we could, or get a nicer car if we could. But here the Buddha is, you know, I have the methods to completely eliminate anger and completely eliminate jealousy and ill will and maliciousness and covetousness and getting really excited and interested and um, happily trying to put those methods into practice and never feeling again and again not having unrealistic expectations like, oh, I've meditated on patience for 3 months, why and then lost my temper, I did terrible, I must be, and so that this is useless, this is and so we give it up. But just thinking again and again, coming back to our practice and being willing to never abandon the methods, the antidotes that we are um, that we understand do have that power eventually. So then he says, again, there's another list of three in terms of in terms of, so this attitude, this mind is understood as one of the principal antidotes to laziness. Um, so, we said that patience is primarily a mind that's a strong antidote to anger. And here, this is a mind that's a strong antidote to laziness. And there's, again, three types of laziness to overcome. So there aren't three types. Before, we had three types of patience. And here, we don't have three types of enthusiastic perseverance, but we have three types of laziness that enthusiastic perseverance are all antidotes of. So the first is procrastination, um, and then the second is um, self-cherishing, um, above above practicing Dharma, and then the third is the laziness of discouragement or low self-worth. So when we procrastinate, we just never start. We just never, we're just always pushing it off. We're always saying, well, yeah, the causes and the conditions, they're not right yet. Maybe when this happens, maybe when that happens, then I'll have the right causes and conditions. And unfortunately, generally, the right causes and conditions never happen. And really, within procrastination, getting caught up in um, it can, in one way, there's a kind of busyness that doesn't seem like laziness, but from the Buddhist perspective is laziness, which is, really caring a great deal about maybe, a worldly position or status, or reaching a certain level of success that has to do with getting more wealth or more status or so on. And that can be procrastination in the sense that it can fit into the category of this laziness of procrastination, because we tell ourselves that we're actually so busy. We tell ourselves that I just don't actually have time because I have this happening, I have that happening, I have all of these projects, and so on. And so, with all of that busyness, But from the Buddhist perspective, that busyness is directed at a goal that isn't of much value. And so we keep putting off the practice. And then the second, is self-cherishing, putting self-cherishing above practicing the Dharma. That can also fall into that sense of busyness if we're trying to, um, inflate our self-worth and so on, or we're attracted to wealth and more so than the benefits, thinking of the benefits of wealth and so on, and giving that more power than actually getting realizations of the Dharma. Or it can just be thinking, um, there are pleasurable, sensory pleasurable experiences that I might have less of if I make time and space for my practice. I would rather go do this. I would rather have this kind of sensory experience. I would rather than, if I only have this much money, either I'm going to save up to go on retreat or I'm going to save up and go to Europe. And I would rather go to Europe with that, $5,000 than I would to spend, a month meditating, in some incredible retreat somewhere. So that would be basically like prioritizing things that seem comfortable, that seem pleasurable, and thinking that, well, I can't do all of those things if I'm spending time and effort in my. And then there's the laziness, which again is another example of a kind of laziness that doesn't seem like it from our perspective, but is that from the Buddhist perspective, kind of holding the view that spiritual growth is for other people. It's not something that I'm capable of. Yeah, the Buddha accomplished that. Yeah, Shantideva and Milarepa, and but they were special. That's not me. I can't possibly. My mind is so deluded. My mind is so under the influence of that. I might as well just not even bother. It's hopeless. Um, so that kind of negative self-talk is also but it's kind of letting ourselves off the hook. It's kind of, we don't ever actually have to face the afflictions if we just decide that they're overwhelming and they can't be removed, that they can't, that there's nothing, then we're free to indulge in the afflictions. We're free to just let them continue to run rampant in the mind if we just hold the view that we're powerless to actually impact them, when everything that we know about 2600 years of Buddhist history is that, many people have been successful. It isn't just the few. I mean, okay, maybe we'll never, create, um, a sect of, Buddhism like Lama Tsongkhapa or something. But, there's many people who do achieve enlightenment. Maybe they don't manifest, at least not in ways that we know of as like wheel turning, but who knows, in other universes, down, billions of years down, maybe they did manifest subsequently as a wheel turning Buddha or something. That's certainly, and we just, it's not part of our direct experience. But as long as we decide that we are actually, that it isn't, because the balance of evidence actually doesn't suggest that you have to be special. But what we're actually saying, because all of those great, even those great teachers, their minds were the same, had the same level of delusion, had the same level of affliction at some point that our mind did. So actually, we're saying that we're special, and that there's something about the totality of the afflictions in our own mind that is somehow different from everyone else, and that yes, it actually did work for all of these other people, but it won't work for oneself because we are the worst out of anyone who's ever lived. um, so that kind of defeatist attitude from the Buddhist perspective is a kind of laziness. It just allows us to ignore all of the contrary evidence and to just never actually feel like we need to get started, because we've already prejudged the the result, what's going to happen, even though there's no validity to that way of thinking. It's really just sort of the ego giving us an excuse to avoid ever, because it's comfortable to face the afflictions and actually put time and energy and effort into undermining them. It's much easier to just find a way of thinking about it that short circuits that whole process. And that's really, from the Buddhist perspective, what they're saying is that it's just a cop out. It's just a way of um, never actually having to be uncomfortable and try to genuinely make effort. Okay, any thoughts or questions about enthusiastic perseverance? Yes, David.
Hi, Venerable. I was just wondering, I've been reading How to Practice Dharma by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and it really seems like, I mean, according to that book, I think anyway, from what I understand, that the beginning of Dharma practice really is in renunciation of the eight worldly concerns. And so I was wondering, in the context of this, like it makes sense to me that if you had renounced the eight worldly concerns, then that joy of practicing the Dharma, I think, would come quite naturally. But I was wondering also too, like then I think it's kind of illogical to say that you should like wait to practice the six perfections in order to, or you should wait to practice the six perfections. Like you should renounce the worldly concerns first and then do that. But it kind of seems like everything can kind of be uh, used together. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Mm-hmm.
it's almost as if like maybe joyous perseverance can kind of inform your ability to renounce the worldly concerns, and then also the worldly
Mm-hmm.
concerns obviously makes it easier to enjoy the practice and benefit others in that way. So I was wondering if you kind of like speak on that so far as the order is concerned.
Sure. So I think all of these concepts are certainly understood to be relevant for all of the stages of the Buddhist training, all of the stages of the Buddhist path. Because, for example, like the next one that we're going to look at is concentration, right? The perfection of concentration, which is directly related to meditation, right? And all Buddhist practitioners, even before, even when they're just kind of looking at the initial contemplations of small scope, you're meditating, you're going through you're trying to generate the three wisdoms, the wisdom of listening, contemplating, and meditating, even when you're just trying to figure out what's guru devotion, what's impermanence, and so on. And certainly a person may well develop single pointed concentration uh, before they become a bodhisattva, before they have a direct realization of bodhicitta. And so they've become a really expert meditator. Um, so it isn't to say that the six perfections as topics, as like bodies of knowledge, or um, are irrelevant for any other kind of practitioner other than bodhisattvas. but that these practices become the perfections of these practices on the bodhisattva grounds and paths, and that we are striving in them, all the way through. Um, but we wouldn't expect to say that we've perfected concentration or ethics or generosity or joyous effort or wisdom, until we're on and practicing in the bodhisattva grounds and paths. And then, because in particular we can't say that they're perfections until we've joined them with a direct realization of emptiness, which is something that generally, is often recommended, that a person puts energy, puts a lot of energy into after having achieved a direct realization of bodhicitta. So I think it's just to say that it's when a person is actively on the bodhisattva grounds and paths that these trainings become the perfections of these trainings, not that they become relevant for the first time.
Okay, that makes more sense now. Thank you. Yeah, in fact, as I was asking that question, I remember there's actually a part of that book too where he says that the whole path is basically a means of renouncing the worldly concerns. It's not necessarily that's. I mean, in one sense, I mean, he talks about how he has like a whole section on on motivation. So you can give someone like a beggar like money or something like that, and he lists there's 4 different ways of doing it, and the final one is that you just do it because to gain the happiness of this life, basically. So in one sense, it's like your, bodhicitta motivations is at the very beginning, but at the same time, it's like the whole path, kind of like what you're saying is it doesn't become the perfections until you actually, I guess, like reach the bodhisattva grounds or something. So yeah, he says like, I think the whole path is the way to, you know, completely get rid of the worldly concerns.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, all of the contemplations are refining, all of the other contemplations that, when you, um, as you're progressing, it's all self reinforcing, and it's all kind of, and then, of course, ultimately it has to be, because you can get genuine, realizations of the small scope and the middle scope and so on, without emptiness and, what have you. When you do have that realization of emptiness and you're combining it with the realization of emptiness, and even the difference between a person who has a realization of a topic with or without fully qualified calm abiding, that's also different. The level of the intensity of that understanding and that realization is quite dependent on the level of concentration you have. Um, but and then even within that, still you can have the mistake. If you don't have emptiness, if you haven't realized emptiness, then you're going to make the mistake of reifying, the person engaging in the object, the person engaging in the meditation, the object itself, and then what seems like the realization that the person is having of that object. And then you get rid of that kind of dualistic view too. So, but still, so there's definitely different levels. And I think that you add depth to the degree of, that you've done all of these things, even the degree to which we have guru devotion, the degree to which we understand impermanence and death. There's different, later abilities, contemplations, capacities that add new depth to all of those contemplations.
I see. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other? All right, so we'll end there for today. Unless there's a final thought or question.
That's it. And I would just say that the book, the How to Practice Dharma. I don't know if the other like Sheila and if the others didn't know, but there's all the audiobook is like totally free. It's on YouTube. I have it downloaded. You can just listen to it. Like it's just so crazy how you can just listen to like Dharma. You know, I was just thinking that today. But if anyone was interested, it's How to Practice Dharma: Teachings on the Eightfold of Dharmas. I don't know if anyone else would like. Yeah, but you can just play it in your ear, while you're driving or something, and it just helps a lot. It helps a lot. That book just gets right to the point. Just like insane, like so good. Anyway, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. It's really intense.
Yeah, in a good way.
All right. So we'll end with dedication. So bring to mind the altruistic intention that we established. And I think that by having listened and contemplated, we've actualized that motivation, which has generated positive energy in the mind. That positive energy will ripen in a beneficial way. So we want that positive energy to ripen in a particularly spiritually supportive, beneficial way. So think of in your own life, your own practice, the way in which you are offering fruit of your practice in that spiritually supportive, beneficial way. All right. So we do meet on Thursday. I believe next week we're off the whole week, I think, because of the puja and then Thanksgiving. But be sure, double check. See if I'm wrong about that.
All right, thank you.